This week on Who Deserves to Be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we make the case for you to vote for the White Stripes and Joe Cocker to be inducted into this year's class. The nominees for this year's class for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have been announced. The list for this year is as follows: Bad Company, The Black Crowes, Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Billy Idol with Steve Stevens, Joy Division / New Order, Cyndi Lauper, Maná, Oasis, Outkast, Fish, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes. As they have for the past decade or so, the Hall has a fan vote, which does count towards who gets inducted. Go to vote.rockhall.com to vote. You can vote for up to 7 artists once a day until April 21st. The link to the voting is in the show notes there. That would be the vote.rockhall.com link. This year, we will do what we always do. We'll take a look at the cases for at least 2 nominees per week. This week, we take a look at 2 artists who we've beaten the drum for before, the White Stripes and Joe Cocker. First up, the Detroit, Michigan duo of Jack and Meg White, better known as the White Stripes. The duo have been eligible since 2023 and were nominated in their first year. This is now their second nomination, and as we always do, to the tail of the tape we go. The White Stripes released 6 studio albums, 13 live albums, and 1 compilation album and an EP. Of those, 5 hit the top 40 on the American music charts, with 3 of those 5 going top 10, but none of those going to number 1. In the United Kingdom, 5 albums went to the top 40, with 3 of those 5 going to the top 10, with 2005's Get Behind Me, Satan going to number 3, and 2 albums hitting number 1, 2003's Elephant and 2007's Icky Thump. Singles-wise, the duo released 28 of those. Of those, 11 hit the top 40 in America, with 6 of those 11 hitting the top 10, with 2003's iconic classic Seven Nation Army and 2007's Icky Thump going to number 1. In the UK, 13 hit the top 40, with 5 of those 13 hitting the top 10, but none of those ever hitting number 1. Here's a few reasons why you should consider them for your vote. First off, for those of you who only know the group from the sports stadium and EDM festival staple Seven Nation Army, the White Stripes were a highly influential band in the early part of the century and set the tone for the garage rock revival of the past couple of decades. The duo had a stripped-down sound and raw energy that inspired countless musicians and bands, including the Black Keys, the Strokes, and the Hives. The White Stripes brought a new level of authenticity and simplicity to rock music that resonated with audiences and helped to revive the genre. Second, the White Stripes were not only influential but also commercially successful. The breakout album, White Blood Cells, went gold in the US and also in the UK and helped to catapult the band into the mainstream. Their follow-up album, Elephant, was even more successful, debuting at number 1 on the UK charts. And it also got a Grammy Award for Best Alternative Music Album. The White Stripes sold millions of records worldwide, and they still, to this day, have a significant impact on the music industry. Third, the White Stripes were really innovative. They experimented with different instruments, sounds, and styles, incorporating elements of folk, blues, and country into their music. Their use of unconventional instruments for rock bands, such as the marimba and the mandolin, added a unique dimension, we'll say, to their sound, and also their creative visual aesthetic made them stand out from a lot of other bands at that time. Fourth, the White Stripes had a lasting impact on pop culture beyond their music. They had their iconic red and white color scheme, which was incorporated into everything, including their artwork, the stage design, even their clothing, and that became synonymous with the band and is still recognized as the White Stripes theme throughout the world. Their music, especially Seven Nation Army, has also been featured in a lot of films, television shows, and commercials, which kind of cements their spot in pop culture history. Fifth, although this really shouldn't have anything to do with the nomination process, Jack White is one of the biggest musicologist musicians out there, along with Questlove from The Roots. Between the two of them, they probably know more music history than the entire internet. My thought is that if the Hall doesn't put the White Stripes in, then maybe they should consider putting Jack White in because of the work he's done as a music historian. He could probably get into the Award for Musical Excellence category, we'll say. Regardless, putting the White Stripes into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would be extremely well-deserved. Now, on to the gravelly-voiced Sheffield, England singer Joe Cocker. Back to the tail of the tape we go. Joe Cocker released 22 studio albums, 9 live albums, and 14 compilation albums. Of those, 5 hit the top 40 in America, with 1970's live album Mad Dog and Englishman hitting number 2, but no other top 10s. In Joe's native United Kingdom, 9 hit the top 40, with 3 hitting the top 10. Joe also released 68 singles. Of those, 9 hit the top 40 in America, with 3 of those 9 hitting the top 10. 1975's You Are So Beautiful hit number 5. 1970's The Letter hit number 7. And 1982's duet with Jennifer Warnes, Up Where We Belong, from the hit movie An Officer and a Gentleman, starring Richard Gere, Deborah Winger, and in his Academy Award-winning performance, the late, great Louis Gossett Jr., Up Where We Belong won the Academy Award as well for Best Song and also a Grammy Award. In the United Kingdom, Joe had 9 songs hit the top 40, with 3 of those 9 hitting the top 10, including 1968's iconic cover version of the Beatles hit With a Little Help from My Friends, which hit number 1. Joe's version, of course, was also the theme song to the original version of the TV show The Wonder Years, which starred Fred Savage as Kevin Arnold, with the voice narration of Daniel Stern, who was Joe Pesci's burglar partner in the original Home Alone movie. Man, I love all these pop culture references. Some of Joe's best-known songs that weren't big hits include You Can Leave Your Hat On from the 1986 movie 9.5 Weeks, starring Kim Basinger and Mickey Rourke, Unchain My Heart, and Feelin' All Right, which has been used in a ton of commercials. Actually, all 3 of those songs have been used in a ton of commercials. Joe Cocker was known for his gravelly voice, blues rock style, and the way that he twisted his body when he sang, which was famously parodied by the late great John Belushi in a sketch on Saturday Night Live. Joe influenced many artists with his performances and vocal energy, including Rod Stewart, Bruce Springsteen, Lenny Kravitz, Adele, Sam Smith, Amy Winehouse, John Fogerty, Hozier, Dave Grohl, Jack White, the aforementioned Jack White, Marcus Mumford, Billy Corgan, Ryan Adams, Leon Bridges, John Legend, and Jason Isbell. Joe has been called one of the 100 greatest singers of all time by Rolling Stone magazine, no less. So after all of this, with commercial success and star power influence, why wasn't Joe Cocker even nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until 2025, i.e. this year, especially since he's been eligible for the Hall since 1995? Good question. Even Billy Joel tried to get Joe inducted in 2014 before Joe passed away from lung cancer, but even that didn't work. Perhaps former board member Jan Wenner had something against Joe and kept him out. I don't know. But Wenner was ousted a couple of years ago, so I think that the log jam against some artists will now break. Anyway you slice it, though, Joe Cocker finally deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like I said before, the Hall has a fan vote, which does count towards who gets inducted. Go to vote.rockhall.com to vote, We put the link in the show notes for you to do it easily. You can vote for up to 7 different artists once a day until April 21st. And next week, we will take a look at 2 more artists who we've already beaten the drum for before. Billy Idol with Steve Stevens and Joy Division / New Order. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.